A little introduction. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. We are back for the second session of Women in Rabbinic Law and Narrative with Dr. Shana Strauch Schick. As a reminder to those joining us here on Zoom, I will be sending you an invitation to become a panelist. That does not obligate you to do anything. That does not take any of the features away from you. It just gives you more opportunities. So you can come into the room and turn your camera on, share your smiling face with us if you would like to do that. You don't have to. And you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself to participate in conversation. Otherwise, you're welcome to use the chat here on Zoom, or those joining us on Facebook, you're welcome to put questions and comments directly below the video in the comments section, and I'll do my best to check in now and then to migrate those over here and keep you part of the conversation. Without further ado, Dr. Schick, please.
Okay. Thank you so much. I posted the sources for today on the chat, so I hope that is accessible for everyone, and people on Facebook have their they can get sources. I will share the sources on the screen as well. So nice to be here again. So last week we started talking about the different ways that the Bavli exempts or excludes women from halachot that, rather surprisingly maybe, we saw that the Yerushalmi or Eretz Yisrael texts obligate women in. Okay, so first of all, we're just seeing that some halachot, we saw things like Torah reading, wearing tzitzit, Torah study. We saw that the Eretz Yisrael text, the Yerushalmi, the Tosefta have a much more inclusive view with regard to women's obligation than maybe we would normally think. So we saw that the majority opinion in the Eretz Yisrael halachic literature is that women are actually obligated in tzitzit. We saw a breita which discussed here. Actually, you can share it on here. We saw a breita which discusses what people are allowed to learn when they are ritually impure. And we saw here. Sorry, I didn't get to it. Put it on here. We saw that in the, I'm trying to find what we're doing, that in the Eretz Yisrael versions of this tradition, people on the list were all women, here we go, in various states of impurity. Whereas once this breita appears in the Bavli, we saw that all the women are replaced for men in varying states of impurity. So we saw just first of all that the Eretz Yisrael texts just have obligate women in halachot that we generally think of women not being obligated in. That's one. And the second thing we saw is that we started looking at specific patterns that are employed in the Bavli for exempting women from halachot. So the pattern we looked at last week was that we saw how the Bavli, and I'll put it in here, the Bavli modify or adds to an inclusive Tosefta tradition. So going back to the example we just saw, we saw how the Tosefta and the breita, the tradition as appears in the Talmud Yerushalmi, list females in varying states of impurity. But when this breita, when this tradition appears in the Bavli, there are no women in it. They've been replaced by men in varying states of impurity. And we saw, like the striking example is instead of a nida, a menstruating woman that appears in the Tosefta, in the Bavli's version is it's ba'in al nidot, a man who has sexual relations with a menstruating woman. I actually was reading the book I referred to last time, Elizabeth Shank's Alexander's book on women in time-bound commandments. That's what the book is called, or gender in time-bound commandments. And she actually, in her discussion of this Breita, she actually says, don't read too much into this. This doesn't mean that women necessarily learned, because really the main point of this tradition is to point out that Bale Akeren Asurim Bechulan, that a man who is impure due to a seminal emission, due to ejaculation, he's not allowed to do these things. And therefore, the tradition just brought these to highlight the man. So it's really just theoretical, and it doesn't mean women learn. So, maybe, and as I said, other scholars such as Talilan have pointed out, well, if you have to tell people what they need to learn, it's obviously, that would indicate that's because they are studying, they are engaged in this Torah study. But I would also just counter that the fact that the Bavli couldn't even have a tradition which even theoretically would suggest that women would be learning, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Mishnah, Midrash, Halachot, Agadot. The Bavli can't even have women be on that list. So, whether this is just theoretical or was, is depicting, an actual reality of women learning, it's still telling that the land of Israel traditions is even able to present a tradition which does that. But for our purposes, we were showing how, so there's this pattern. We saw it with regard to Torah learning. We saw it with regard to reading Torah, that while the Tosefta, it does, undoubtedly say Hakol Olin Liminyan Shela. Everyone can read the Torah. Everyone can be called up for the 7 aliyot, the 7 readings of the Torah, and including women, and maybe for technical. Now we said, what does this line mean? Maybe you don't call women in from outside, or they don't read for the public, whatever it is, maybe a technical reason. But technically, or women are allowed to read from the Torah. But then we saw when the tradition is in the Bavli, it's Amru Chachamim, women don't read from the Torah. So it seems to be really struck down in a much more definitive way than in the Tosefta. And finally, another really clear example is Tzitzit. We saw the Sifrei, a work of Midrash Halacha, the Tosefta, and the Breita, the tradition that appears in Yerushalmi, all make it very clear women are obligated in Tzitzit, according to the first anonymous opinion of the Breita. And it's the minority view of Rabbi Shimon, who says, no, actually, Tzitzit are time-bound, therefore women are exempt from it. But when this tradition appears in the Bavli, we only have the view of Rabbi Shimon, and it's not even attributed to Rabbi Shimon, it's just presented as the Mishnah's view. Or it's not a Mishnah, it's a Breita, sorry. And in this Breita, in this Tannaitic tradition, Tzitzit is just on the list of time-bound obligations from which women are exempt, and there's no indication that it's subject to debate at all. So that was the first pattern that we saw. This pattern, once again, of the Bavli modifying or adding to an inclusive Tosefta tradition. And the fact that we see this occur in a number of times, you could say, well, maybe that's just how the tradition came down. So maybe, and it just keeps on happening again and again with regard to traditions discussing women. But it would seem to point to the fact that this is a pattern and an intentional one. So the next pattern that we're going to look at is where the Mishnah presents one exclusionary view. It says women are exempt. The Bavli accepts the ruling, and the Yerushalmi challenges them. And then we're going to, so hopefully we'll see 2 cases today, and one which also harks back to the one we saw last time. So this is a very important Mishnah, very important sugya with regard to women's obligation in mitzvot. Because it's what the theme of the Mishnah is, and it goes through a list of things that women, of course, slaves and children, the group that often goes together, are exempt from. So this Mishnah talks about things which women, slaves and children are obligated and exempt from. So it says, Nashim va'avadim ukitanim. So this is the first source in the sources you have. Women, slaves, and minors are exempt, ketur mikriyat Shema, min hatfilin, exempt from recitation of Shema and from wearing tefillin, phylacteries. V'chayavim b'tfilah v'mezuzah v'birkat hamazon, but are obligated with regard to a praying, and by praying, it means the Shmona Esrei, the 18 blessings, the 18 benedictions. That's what it refers to. They're obligated in prayer, putting a mezuzah on the door, and blessing after meals. So in this anonymous Mishnah, so we're going to focus on, our real focus is going to be on Shema, but we'll see how the two Talmuds treat both of these. So women are exempt from the twice daily recitation of Shema, wearing tefillin, but are obligated in prayer, mezuzah, and birkat hamazon. Now, this Mishnah seems to be pretty straightforward. It says clearly exempt from some things, obligated in others. And yet, you're going to see that while there are many parallels between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli's treatment of this Mishnah, there are differences between them. First, let's look at the Yerushalmi. So I only have the Hebrew here, so maybe, maybe to make things easier, I'll share the sources because it has the English as well, but you all should have it. So let me open it up. Share my screen. Okay. So there we go. Okay, so let's begin with the Yerushalmi's treatment of it, and it's on the right-hand column. So ask the Yerushalmi, Nashim minayin. How do we know women? Meaning, the implication is, how do we know women are exempt from seemingly Shema, maybe tefillin as well? It doesn't make it clear, but it says, "V'limatem otam et b'nechem." You shall teach your children. Now, this is in Devarim Yud Alid Yud Tet. This is the one of the verses that make up the Shema. You shall teach these to your children. Now, of course, in Hebrew is a gendered language. So, b'nechem, it can just mean children. And though it's in the male, it's because, there is, I guess, a male bias in Hebrew, Penechem can mean both children, generic children, but also male children. But this drasha says, et benechem v'lo et benotechem, your sons and not your daughters. Now, just this is a drasha. It's a Tanaitic drasha that's found in the Sifrei, and we are going to come back to this another class when we focus more on Torah study. But it says, okay, so women, how do we know women are exempt from Shema? Well, it says it's not really clear how this drasha, how this homily answers it, but it seems to be saying, we have to make you could just understand this as saying, well, this pasuk, this verse is from Shema, and it only directs it to B'nechem, your sons, and not your daughters. Now, we can just leave it at that for now. Then ask Abadim minayin, how do we know slaves? So then it brings Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is your God, Hashem is one. So this only is speaking to someone whose only master is God. So this excludes a slave who has another master. And how do we know minors are exempt seemingly from Shema? Okay, and it brings a verse for that too. Then the Yerushalmi continues, v'chayivim b'tfilah, and they're obligated in a prayer. That makes sense. Everyone should be able to ask for mercy on their own behalf. Like that makes sense. Everyone's obligated in a prayer. Ubin mezuzah, we know the Mishnah said everyone's obligated to hang a mezuzah on their door. And how do we know that? You shall write it on your house. Now again, you could say, well, if we wanted to be a little reading here, well, ukitatem is written in the masculine, so it doesn't. But again, Hebrew, because it's a gendered language and it has a preference for the masculine, like masculine applies to everyone. It can apply to only men or everyone. So it's clearly understanding ukitabtem as applying to everyone, I guess. So it brings the verse, you shall eat, be satisfied, and bless your God. Again, it's written in the masculine, but it's not understanding that as being directed at men alone. Now, as is the way of the Yerushalmi, as we already, I think, mentioned, I think the Yerushalmi is generally a lot terse, a lot shorter than the Bavli. So it's just, bringing the drasha, just bringing the pasuk without, more explanation on it. So, should make a few dots here. There's now a little bit of a digression, and there is a short discussion that appears here, which also appears elsewhere, about time-bound mitzvot, which we're skipping over for now. And then the sugya continues. So first it talks about time-bound mitzvot, and then also has another discussion about Birkat Hamazon that we are going to hopefully learn today. And now the Gemara reports a discussion between two Amoraim, that those are rabbis who, post-Mishnaic rabbis. These are rabbis during that Talmudic period from Eretz Yisrael, from the land of Israel. And these are the third and fourth generation Amoraim. So they have the following discussion. It says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yuda ben Pazi. So Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Judah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi in the Galilean Aramaic, which is the language of the Yerushalmi. Yehuda is Yuda. That's how it's said. So Rabbi Yuda. So these two rabbis, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yuda ben Pazi, havu mitivin. They were hitting, and clearly they were talking about this Mishnah. And Amru, and they said, Lo mistavra b'kriyat Shema she'kol achad ve'achad mishanein b'piv. So here, I'm going to give you the English here. They say, isn't it reasonable that just like with regard Shema, everyone should have to mishanein b'piv, should have to, now that word mishanein, that is a word that's clearly taken from the verses about Shema, vishinantam levanecha. And the word vishinantam, like the Hebrew word for tooth is shein. It's something sharp. So mishanein has a connotation to sharpen, to repeat something in the course of a study. And that's why it has the meaning to study, because you're sharpening through learning, through study, through repetition. So, but the English given here, so shouldn't everyone have to speak it distinctly as Shema for themselves? Why? Because lo mistavrash b'tfilah she'kol achad ve'achad mevakesh rachim alzmo. Just as we said that it's reasonable that everyone, should have to pray and ask for mercy on their own behalf. So in other words, what are they saying? Once says Reb Yossi and Reb Yehuda, well, we already said that everyone should have to pray on their own behalf. I mean, that's exactly what we just said. The Mishnah, why does the Mishnah obligate everyone in a prayer? Everyone should have to ask for mercy on their own behalf. Well, why shouldn't that apply to Shema as well? Now, why everyone should have to say Shema on their own behalf? It's significant that they don't make it. All they say is Now, for now, I just want to say that all throughout the Yerushalmi, in non-Mishnaic statements, meaning either it's a statement from an Amora or an anonymous statement, the verb leshanim always has the meaning of to study a Torah. Now that's significant because, in a truth, Shema, there's different purposes given for why we say Shema. That's found throughout Sifrei Chazal, and actually goes back to even Second Temple times as well. It's clear there was already during the time of Second Temple, people said Shema in some form. So what are the, basically the two purposes that we find in Sifrei Chazal for why we say Shema is either it's Kabbalat all Malchut Shemaim or all mitzvot. It's the acceptance of the yoke of heaven or the yoke of mitzvot, accepting doing the commandments. So that's one purpose that's given for why we say Shema two times a day. It's a way to accept God. The other purpose that we find in Sifrei Chazal and Rabbinic literature for why we say Shema is that it's a form of Torah aggadic. So this, both of these different purposes of Shema are found in the Mishnah. So, for example, in the first Mishnah, when Rabbi Gamliel's sons, come home late and they've missed the time of Shema. Maybe it's not in the Mishnah, it's in the Torah. I forget where they say, okay, so even if it's past the time of Shema, you can still say Shema because it's Torah aggadic. So you don't lose out by not, you can still say Shema even if it's past the time of his recitation. So why am I going through all this? Because, what is it that Rav Yossi and Rav Yehuda ben Pazi are arguing? Why do they think everyone should have to say Shema? So on one hand, you can say, well, if it's about Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemaim, if Shema is about accepting the yoke of heaven, then everyone should have to do that. That's men, women, slaves, children. Yeah, everyone should have to do that. Just like everyone should ask for mercy on their behalf. And when we go to the Bavli, we'll see that is precisely and the argument that's raised for why one would think maybe women should have to say Shema. However, the Yerushalmi doesn't say that. And I wonder, I propose, I should say, that it might be significant the fact that the verb used, mishanein befiv, is a verb that only means in the Yerushalmi's post-Tanaitic literature or post-Tanaitic sources, it always means to learn a Torah. So they might be saying, if Shema everyone should have to say Shema as a form of Torah aggadic, just like everyone should have to pray, ask for mercy on their own behalf. So what would that mean? So first of all, it's definitely clear that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi think that everyone should have an obligation in Kriyat Shema. They are arguing with the Mishnah, the Mishnaic law, which says Nashim Piturim Kriyat Shema. Women are exempt from Kriyat Shema. So they definitely are arguing that that's a premise, and maybe they're even arguing with the premise that maybe they're even proposing that women should be obligated in Torah study as well, but I'll get to that at another class. Yes, Naomi has a question. So you can unmute yourself. Naomi, do you want to? Yeah. Do you want to, Naomi? Yeah. Sorry, we can't hear you. Is your, I see you're not on mute. If it's easier, you can type your question. Yeah. It's a little muffled. Yeah, it's not so clear.
All right. Well, I'll try asking, or would you rather that I type it?
Oh, now we can hear you. So.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. No. In terms of that the women are obligated to daven, I'm just a little confused because I understand everyone should have the opportunity to to talk to God directly, to ask for forgiveness or ask for whatever directly.
Mm-hmm.
But to me that means that women should be allowed to daven, which is not the same thing as women should be required to daven.
Well, the Mishnah says chayavim b'tefillah, obligated in tefillah. So the Yerushalmi is explaining the logic for why everyone has an obligation in prayer. So what came first is the Mishnah's rule of chayavim b'tefillah, obligated with regard to prayer. And then this logic is explaining why the Mishnah obligates everyone in a prayer. So meaning it's saying it's logical. Everyone, of course, is obligated in a prayer. Everyone should have the right, or everyone should ask mercy for themselves. Maybe I'm not translating it well. Is it everyone should have that right, or everyone should speak to God and ask for mercy? Being a human, we all have that need.
Okay. Oh, so maybe it's just a different translation because it's not just that everyone should have the right.
Yeah, it's more. I mean, the Mishnah's rule came first. Ooh, there's a bit of an echo, so I don't know if you have two screens open. But anyways, yeah, thank you for that clarification.
It's not just that you should have permission, it's everyone should be obligated.
Yeah, well, everyone is obligated. I mean, that is, I'm just going to mute you because there's an echo. Oh, thank you. So the Mishnah's rule is chayavim b'tefillah. Everyone is obligated. So that's the starting assumption. And that's the reason offered for why the Mishnah obligates everyone. So what's clear from the Yerushalmi is that we have these two Amoraim from third and fourth generation land of Israel who challenge the exemption of women from reciting a Kriyat Shema in the Mishnah. And they're saying this doesn't make sense. Why does the Mishnah the same? We had a sound reason for obligating everyone in a prayer that makes sense. So by the same token, everyone should be obligated in Shema as well. Now, skip ahead a little bit. Okay, their challenge in the Yerushalmi is left unresolved. So it's just left. They raise that a challenge, and no answer is given to it. However, if we just jump forward in time, let me get this over here. Sorry, let me do another screen share here. sorry, screen share. Me 1 second, sorry. Okay, here we go. Where are we? There we go. Sorry. Okay. So when we jump ahead a few generations to a much later text called Masechet Ketanot, you sometimes see these works called the minor tractates. There are a few of them. Masechet Chalan. There's a bunch of them. So these should not be confused with regular tractates of the Bavli or the Yerushalmi. These are actually pretty late texts. And this particular one, while there's some who date it a little bit earlier, most scholars date it to the 8th century, either from Eretz Yisrael itself or a place that followed Eretz Yisrael halacha, meaning it's definitely not a place that's under the influence of the Bavli and a Bavli halacha. So in this Masechet Ketanot, it has a halacha which is very similar to our Mishnah, with a slight difference. So I'll just read it. It says right here, Anashim, so this is about Yesh Karim Sefer Kinot Ba'erev, talking about, on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, reading a keynote. Okay, and then skipping a little bit, Hanashim Chayavot Lishmoa Kriyat Sefer Kanashim. Women have to hear reading of the Torah, Kol Shekin Zecher, of course, men too. V'chein hein Chayavot B'Kriyat Shema. And they're also obligated in the recitation of Shema, prayer, blessing after meals, and mezuzah. Now, recall these three things: prayer, birkat hamazon, and mezuzah are all in the Mishnah of things that women have to do. And now, this later tractate adds a Kriyat Shema to the Mishnah's list. So this text indicates that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda's Pazi challenge, or at least something to that effect, was accepted generations later. And this really is particularly significant because there are some who have pointed out, some scholars who have noticed the more inclusive positions in Eretz Yisrael text versus the Bavli in a few isolated cases, and suggest maybe it's just a chronological thing, meaning Eretz Yisrael texts are generally earlier, and so it's not a geographical difference, it's just the Eretz Yisrael text represents an earlier halacha, whereas the Bavli represents the later one with regard to women. But this is a very clear evidence, at least with regard to Shema, that the more inclusive view, which we saw evidenced of in the Yerushalmi, continued and persisted even in the 8th century, hundreds of years after the Yerushalmi. And certainly after Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi and Rabbi Yossi made that a claim. So at least in regard to Kriyat Shema, we see that this view persisted in Eretz Yisrael. So we see that there's an opinion in the Mishnah. It's challenged in the Yerushalmi. And then that becomes the accepted halacha, as we see by the 8th century. Okay, now we saw the Yerushalmi's treatment of this Mishnah, which clearly, did not accept I keep missing where I am. It did not accept the Mishnah at face value. It rejects the Mishnah. It challenges it at least. Okay, now when we go to the Bavli's treatment of this Mishnah, we find, not surprisingly, something else. So let's go back to the sources. Too many things open on my computer. There we go. Okay. So the Bavli, it has a lot of parallels, as we'll see. So it begins. Kriyat Shema Peshita. So we're going to see that the Bavli, it contains a lot of what's found in the Yerushalmi, but it has added to it, which is a very Bavli thing. It's where we're going to find this repeated formula, which just keeps on that the Bavli reiterates through each halacha, through each command that's mentioned in the Mishnah. First, it says Kriyat Shema Peshita. The fact that women and slaves and children are exempt from reciting Shema, that's obvious. Mitzvah say shazman gramahu. This is a positive time-bound command. Chol mitzvah say shazman grama pituro. And all positive time-bound commands, women are exempt from. So first of all, just notice. So the Bavli, so it brings a question. There's a question. I mean, all the Yerushalmi's question was minaya. How do we know? Whereas here, the Bavli is raising a question, which also shows its approach towards the Mishnah. The approach being, the Mishnah doesn't teach us anything that we don't, that we already know. So meaning the Mishnah doesn't have any unnecessary words. Why did the Mishnah have to teach us this halacha, that women are exempt from Shema? We know they're exempt from Shema. How do we know women are exempt from Shema? So now again, it brings a principle that we didn't see here in the Yerushalmi, that it's a positive time-bound command. And again, note that the Yerushalmi only centers its a question on women and not the other two in the group, slaves and children. Something we saw last week. Remember how it switched the order? So of course, women are exempt from Shema. It's time-bound. So mahu de tema, what might you have thought? Since it has the a kingdom of heaven. As you recall, or if you recall, I mentioned that there's two different purposes for Shema that we find given in Sifra Chazal rabbinic literature. One of them being, when you say Shema, you accept the yoke of heaven. So this makes it clear. Well, so what does it say here? What might you have thought? Meaning, why would you have thought women should be obligated in Shema? Because it involves the acceptance of the kingdom of heaven. So Kamash Malan. So we therefore had to learn. So no, that's why the Mishnah had to go out of its way to teach us that women are indeed exempt from Shema, because you might have thought otherwise. And I'll just go through all of them and then we'll come back to that. Minha tefillin. Women are exempt from wearing tefillin. Peshita. Again, it's obvious. And it's obvious probably for the same reason. So mahu de tema. What might you have thought? Because it's juxtaposed in the Torah to mezuzah. It says in the Torah, it says by the verses of Shema, you should be a sign on your hand. Write it on your door post. So because the Torah juxtaposes mezuzah and tefillin, and maybe you would have thought, since women are obligated in mezuzah, because the Mishnah says, so maybe women are also obligated in tefillin. So kamash malan, so that's why the Mishnah had to tell us women are exempt from tefillin. B'chayam b'tefillah. And women are obligated in tefillah derachameininu, because it's asking for mercy, and something that's very similar to what the Yerushalmi. Ma the tema, what might you have thought? Because it says in the Torah morning, night, morning, and afternoon. Maybe you would have thought that prayer is like a positive time-bound command. Kamash malan, so it had to tell us. That's what the Mishnah had to tell us women are obligated in prayer. And it does this with mezuzah and birkat hamazon. So it has this formula of the Mishnah is obvious. It's obvious why the Mishnah had to tell us this, followed by why you would have thought otherwise, followed by, therefore the Mishnah had to teach us this. So we see there are parallels. So we saw this idea of asking for mercy with regard to a prayer is found in both. And Shema, in both the Bavli and Yerushalmi, they both present a reason for why women would be obligated in Shema. But there is, of course, some very significant differences between them. I'd venture to ask, but I know, does anyone want to point out? Can you point to and notice any noteworthy differences between the Bavli's discussion of Shema and the Yerushalmis? Anyone? No. So in both of them, we have a reason for why women should be obligated. However, what's a major difference? In the Bavli, that's only offered to tell you why the Mishnah therefore had to tell us that women are exempt from Shema. Meaning in the Bavli, it only gives that a logic to maintain the position of the Mishnah. Meaning, the Mishnah was right in telling us that women are exempt from Shema. Now, why did it have to tell us that? Because you maybe would have thought that women should be obligated in Shema because it's, accepting, Malchut Shamayim. So this logic is only a given to maintain the exemption that's issued in the Mishnah. It's there to tell you, no, the Mishnah is not giving us unnecessary information because we might have thought women are obligated in Shema. Whereas in the Yerushalmi, no, that's not that. The argument being made is precisely to challenge the Mishnah. Rav Yossi and Rav Yehuda ben Pazi saying this Mishnah doesn't make sense. Women should be obligated in Shema. Everyone should have to say Shema for themselves. So that's one a difference. And that's really the case with all of of the discussions found in the Bible. Yeah, Jennifer, you have a question.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just, I'm sorry, you're just a wonderful teacher. Could you just explain that last point? My pleasure. I'd show myself, but I'm outside and it would be distracting. But I wanted to ask you, can you just explain that last part again? The difference, what you had just explained.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, not at all. No need to ever apologize for a question. Okay, so in the Yerushalmi, Rav Yossi and Rav Yehuda ben Pazi, they argue everyone should have to say Shema for themselves because they think everyone should have to say Shema for themselves. Their argument is in order to challenge the Mishnah's rule. Whereas in the Bavli, when that argument is made, maybe everyone should have to say Shema. It's not because the Bavli thinks women should have to say Shema. That is telling you why the Mishnah had to teach us that women are exempt from Shema. Because asked of the Bavli, I'll just go back here, Peshita, it's obvious. Of course women are exempt from Shema. It's a mitzvot aseh shazman grama. It's a positive precept, which is a fixed time. So why the Mishnah have to tell us? So answers the Bavli. Why the Mishnah have to tell us that women are exempt from Shema? Mahu detema, because what might you have thought? You might have thought, it's ve malchut shamayim. Since it consists of accepting the yoke of heaven, maybe you would have thought women are obligated in Shema. So what did the Mishnah have to tell you? You are wrong. You are wrong to think women should be are obligated in Shema. Women are not obligated in Shema. You maybe would have thought that. So that's why the Mishnah had to come along and tell us the Nashim, Peturim, may Kriyat Shema. So a very similar argument that we find in the Yerushalmi, when it appears in the Bavli, it's not, it's being used for a different function. in the Yerushalmi, it's challenging the premise of the Mishnah. It's challenging the Mishnah's exemption of women. Whereas in the Bavli, it's used to maintain the Mishnah's exemption. It's come to tell us why the Mishnah had to tell us women are exempt from Shema.
I get it now, and also because the accepting the yoke of heaven is not time bound.
You're right. And that's another point I want to make.
Yeah,
that's not actually
okay.
mentioned. Thank you so much for pointing out. I'm so glad you noticed that, because that's not mentioned in the Yerushalmi. So now this is really a lot of discussion in a scholarship. Does the Bavli have the Yerushalmi? There's a wonderful book by a scholar, Elisa Gray, which is about that very topic, but it's limited to Masechet Avodah Zarah, because you can't make a sweeping claim about the entire Bavli, entire Yerushalmi. But she points out there that in the case of Tractate Avodah Zarah, it does look like the Bavli had a lot of the Yerushalmi as kind of a skeleton that it then adds to. So it kind of looks like that our Bavli here, I mean, there's a lot of similarities that it does look like the Bavli and Yerushalmi. If the Bavli doesn't have the Yerushalmi here, at least they have a shared as horse. Okay, I mean those are the two different options. But since there are so many similarities here, if we say the Bavli has the Yerushalmi here in some form, is it purposely making it clear that you would only think women have to say Shema because of Malchut Shamayim? Meaning, we saw in the Yerushalmi, it's not clear what the basis of Rav Yossi and Rav Yehuda's argument is, because they don't say it's Malchut Shamayim. They use this verb, Kol Achad V'Achad Meshanein B'Fiv, which always means, is always a verb which connotes Torah's aggadic. So whether or not that's what they meant here, what's clear is that in the Bavli, there's no ambiguity here. The only reason one would think women have an obligation to say Shema will be because it's about Malchut Shamayim. But again, we see that there's not even the possibility that it could be about Shema as a form of Torah's aggadic. So whether that's a conscious or not, we see that at least in the Yerushalmi, there is room to say that Rav Yossi and Rav Yehuda are arguing that women should have to say Shema for themselves, because they should have to say Shema. Everyone should have to say Shema as a form of Torah's aggadic. Whereas maybe that's not what they mean. I mean, it's possible that they're just using the verb that appears in the Torah also. But what's clear from the Yerushalmi is that it's not unclear. Both options are there, whereas in the Bavli, there's no other option. Women would only be obligated in Shema because it's about accepting the yoke of heaven. Okay? So that's a difference we see. Yes, Naomi, I have a question.
So I'm wondering, you could say, davening is time bound, and therefore women weren't going to be required to do it. But women are in fact required to, but not at any particular time, right? Like men.
I'm sorry, you're saying about a prayer not at any particular time?
Right.
It's a little hard to hear. Now, how women's obligation in prayer is understood, that's actually not so clear. And there are certainly opinions that say women are obligated in the 2 or 3 daily prayers that men are obligated in. So there's really a lot of different opinions. Even the one that says women are not obligated, that's Magen Avraham. Sorry, just an echo slow. would you mind just muting while I talk? I'll just mute it. So there's one later opinion, the Magen Avraham, who is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, that's Rabbi Yosef Karo's Code of Halacha, and he says, really, women should be obligated in prayer, but I look around me and I don't see that's what the women do. So I want to be melamed zechut. I don't want to say all the women are doing something wrong. So let's try to find a way to justify the practice of what we see. So he says, well, maybe when women's obligation to pray, it's just daily calling out to God. But he's really saying that in response to what he sees on the ground, the fact that women aren't doing the, daily once, twice, or three times prayers that men do. But it's more just about what was actually happening than, a black and white understanding of the text. Halacha involves real people. So, when we look in the Gemara, there'd be no reason to distinguish between men and women's obligation in a prayer. And indeed, many do not. Some do, some don't. But it's not, it's not, you wouldn't know that from a reading of the Gemara. To distinguish.
Maybe where I was going to go, doesn't hold on. But I was going to say that, the women are obligated to pray, but not at any particular time. Just once a day, whenever works for them.
I didn't hear your question so much. It's a little hard to understand. Dan, I think what you said is women are obligated to pray, but not any specific. Yeah. Put your question in the chat, and I see another question in the chat. So, which is, can you further reason that women are obligated to learn Torah according to the Yerushalmi? Yes. At least according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi. And that's something I want to get back to that. We will devote a class to Torah study, but it's possible. Now, this is kind of a very radical read of it. Okay, so I'm fully admitting that, but when I examine the use of this verb mishanim in Tanaitic text, it could mean a both. It could mean to learn Torah, and it could mean the ritual recitation of Shema. But in non-Tanaitic text in the Yerushalmi, it always means Torah study. So look, it's possible that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda are going with the Tanaitic use of the term. That's possible, but it's also possible that they're not, and they're saying something far broader, or far, with much larger implication with regards to women's obligation in Torah study than just a statement about Shema. At the very least, they're making a statement about Shema, but it may be a larger one about women's Torah study as well. Okay, I see another question. Okay, Naomi, thank you for writing. I was thinking maybe this could be correct. The women are obligated to pray, but at any time they want, so it's not then a time-bound mitzvah. So just to respond to that, it's not, that is a dispute amongst the halachic deciders. What is women's obligation to pray? So there are some who say women have, even though it's time bound, because women are obligated to pray, once they have that obligation to pray, women are obligated in the 3 times a day. So women are obligated to pray, and it doesn't matter that it's at set times. Women have an obligation to pray. And the 3 times a day. There are those who say, no, it's just once a day. But even the ones who say it's just once a day, as I said, it's more in response to the fact that women aren't praying. So what do we do with this? We're not going to say women are all hitting. Let's find a way to justify what we see women not doing. But you are thinking, right. I mean, these are questions that commentators on the Talmud look at. And this is, by the way, also one of the things that Elizabeth Shanks Alexander looks at and says, there's this rule, women are exempt from all time-bound commands, and yet there are so many time-bound commands that women are actually obligated in. And even when you look at Maimonides' list, there's a lot more exceptions to the rule than actual things which conform to the rule. So that's one of, another reason she says that this might not have been a prescriptive rule. Okay, so anyway, I'll keep reading. I was thinking Shema could have been the same. Women are required to say Shema, but not every morning, every night. Therefore, it's not time-bound. Yeah, I mean, but that's not, that's in so the Bavli does apply that reason that obviously women are exempt from Shema because it's time bound. The Yerushalmi does not connect it to that. It does explain the Mishnah's exemption, and it links it to the adrasha of limadatem otam epenechem below epenotechem. You shall speak of these to your sons, and not daughters. And as we'll see elsewhere, this is a drasha that's used to learn out that men only have an obligation to teach their sons and not their daughters. So elsewhere, the Yerushalmi makes it clear that the connection being made is to Torah study. That's someone who has an obligation in Torah study that has an obligation in Shema. One who does not have an obligation in Torah study does not have an obligation in Shema. So you're definitely, so that's a good question that you asked. And it's, you're thinking like a Talmudist. But the time-bound aspect doesn't play into the Yerushalmi's discussion of it. And again, that's something that Elizabeth Shanks Alexander points to as being, an indicator that mitzvah seisha zman grama was not meant to be this prescriptive rule which prescribes laws from which women are exempt from. It was more meant to describe some categories or some individual laws from which women are excluded from, but it's not the reason women are excluded from them. So I can send a link to her, a book. Anyways, so, okay. So going back to our discussion here, so we see that our Bavli and our Yerushalmi, they have very, very similar very similar material, which appears on the same Mishnah, but it's organized and framed in different ways. That in the Bavli, the whole Bavli sugya is arranged in a way to justify the halachot in the Yerushalmi. So it maintains, the women's exemption from Shema and from Tefillin. And though it uses this formula of, why you would have thought otherwise, the mission is obvious why you would have thought otherwise, but it also then tells us reasons why you would have thought women should not be obligated in tefillah, mezuzah, and birkat hamazon. Whereas the Yerushalmi, it never. So first, it completely justifies women's obligation in prayer, mezuzah, and birkat hamazon, and gives us no havamina. It gives us no counter argument why you would have thought otherwise. That appears in the Yerushalmi, and plus in the Yerushalmi, the argument that is presented as a challenge to the Mishnah's rule, as a challenge to the Mishnah's exclusion from women of Shema, appears in the Bavli as a reason for why the Mishnah had to indeed tell us that women are excluded from this halacha. So once again, so we see how Eretz Yisrael takes a more inclusive approach with regard to women and halach. And again, we saw this view was not just an older relic. It was not just a theoretical question that was raised in the Mishnah. We see that by the 8th century, that became the actual halacha as a codified in a work which rewrote the Mishnah to include Kriyat Shema in its list of chayavim b'tefila mezuzah u'bekat mazon, and it added Shema to that list. So we see Rev Yossi and Rev Yuda's challenge seems to have been accepted. So we see once again the Eretz Yisrael taking a more inclusive approach, and we also see that the Bavli has a systematic way of not following that approach. So in this case, we do see, a reframing of Eretz Yisrael material, and our new pattern that we've seen, which is accepting the Mishnah's exclusive rule, without a question. So next time we will see a case, and it's the next source. So we'll look at it again. We'll look at the sources again. We'll see a case, which is the next part of the same sugya in brachot, which combines both patterns we saw, both this one of accepting the Mishnah's rule, as well as our previous week's pattern of rewording, and in inclusive Tosefta tradition. So time flies, at least for me. Thank you all so much. Our hour seems to be up, sadly. But
Thank you. I have to dash. You're just wonderful. So
you're so kind.
have a great week.
You too. Everyone have a
Just
wonderful
enjoy
week.
to learn with you.
Oh, enjoy it.
So
Enjoy it so
all
much
the
too.
best. Have a
Thank
great
you.
week. Thanks.
You too. Have a
I'll
wonderful
study
week.
more.
Okay.
You too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schick, for a wonderful class. I knew it was going to be interesting, but it's actually fascinating. And thank you to everyone here for participating in our learning community. It really helps to have things be interactive. We all learn more when people ask questions. And we have even more classes coming up. The next one is at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. If you want to learn a bit about heretics in the Talmud Bavli with Dr. Michal Bar Asher Sigal. She'll be here again tonight. And tomorrow, I think we have 5 or 6 classes. I'm sorry, I don't remember anymore, but you can learn more at 5783.dorisa.org. And we look forward to learning with you again soon. Thank you so much.